This is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast. Oh, what's happening out there, my woods people? We are sitting here in my house right now, here in Sulphur Springs, Texas. It's a beautiful day, about 60 degrees, I think, and we're looking at partly cloudy, mostly cloudy, and there's a lot of birds at the feeder behind us. I'm sitting here with my buddy KC again. What's happening, dude?
Man, I'm just evaluating the species that you have visiting the feeder out here. I understand you've been doing a little bit of species research on birds.
I'm pretty much a birder now.
I'm pretty much a birder. I got you converted. That's good news.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. You've got a few little songbirds out there, and nothing tasty has showed up yet.
No, well, depends on if tasty and legal are the same thing.
I bet songbirds would be tasty, but
I mean,
we're not
there's some
gonna cross
Inca
those
out there. I would imagine they're pretty tasty, but I don't think they're legal.
Yeah, we better just lay off of them, man. Yeah. You know, your kids like to watch them too, so
yeah, Jet likes it for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, but man, just living it. We had a pretty cool little church thing yesterday. We put me and my wife work with the youth group a lot, and put on a meal for the elderly people from church for Valentine's Day banquet and stuff like that. And
I was wondering what y'all are doing there. I saw the Facebook post.
Yeah, we were 50s people, man.
Yep.
Which pretty much means you just put on white t-shirts and a leather jacket and you qualify.
Yeah.
But it was cool. It's fun.
You looked good except for the Nikes.
Yeah, I know, man. Like, I don't have any dang Converses. I should have raided your closet.
You should have, man.
I bet you
look like a clown.
7 pairs. Yeah, but it was good. And two long-haired, bearded guys weren't taken very well in the 50s. That was more clean-cut time. So
yeah.
I didn't really fit in, but that's all right. I still cook some burgers. So
did you cook like beef burgers?
Yeah, I had to go to beef burger, man. I love the people go to church with, but I don't have enough elk to go around. So.
Yeah, I was kind of like, man, you probably use a lot of your meat if you did that. So.
No, yeah, the elk's reserved for just the everyday eats.
Yeah, at this point, it's not like you can just go back out there and get a deer, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's
hogback straps or elk is about it.
I deal with that sad reality daily. Did you know that? Like, do you do that? Like in the early spring, late winter like this, you wake up in the morning and you're doing stuff, getting ready or whatever, and you're like, dang, I don't have the option to go deer hunt today if I wanted to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Been doing it all spring so far, and it's been kind of tough because it's been like too cold to really fish, but then you'll get like 3 days of good warm weather, and not that the fishing is bad, but or would be bad necessarily, but like, you know, you kind of, you know, during your warm weather, I mean, here we've been trying to get things done so that during the warm weather that require like the doors to be open around the house or whatever. That way we don't like use the heater doesn't run all day or whatever, you know. So it's kind of been a tough spring. I'm just, I guess we're just now really getting into fishing season finally. So
wait, did you say doors are open? Is that what you said a while ago? What happens when the doors are open on your house?
Well, birds fly in.
Birds fly in and stay all night.
I guess
right?
from the feeder. I don't know. Yeah, last night. So I've been sleeping on the couch for going on week number 3 because everybody in my house sleeps in my bed except for me. And I'm a light sleeper. So if anybody of the 3 move, then I'm going to wake up and they kick me all night. And basically they have kicked me out of my bed. So I'm sleeping on the couch last night and I hear something moving that wakes me up. And it's over in this corner, like probably 15 feet from my head, you know. And I was so tired from all the things that I did this week and weekend that I was like, I don't care what it is. If it's a snake, a rat, it's just going to have to be there until tomorrow. So I'll just go back to sleep. Well, this morning, as I'm kind of waking up, Jet's in here with me, and I'm like, I realize that my wife has already left to go to work, and I hear something fall off the countertop in the kitchen, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? I said, Jet. Well, actually, so before I said anything, I start hearing a chirp, little like cheep, cheep, cheep. And I'm like, Jet, is there a bird in our kitchen? He walks over here and he goes, no. He's not the best. Like, he doesn't look for things very well. So he goes, no. Oh, yeah, there he is. And he was wide-eyed, man. And I ran in there, and there was a wren hopping around on the countertop in there. And he took off to my wife's office, and we had to open the door and go around there and spook him out.
It worked?
It was easy, yeah.
Oh, dang.
Got him out easy. And then, I mean, he tried to fly out the windows a few times and then popped out the door like nothing.
Dang. When I was a kid, we got a hummingbird in the house one time.
Really?
It almost got like dangerous.
Oh, I bet.
Like, just
yeah, watch your eyes. Put your glasses on. Let's go get this thing.
They have a weird thing where like they always want to go up. Like he'd go and just across the ceiling all the way around.
Really?
So pretty much just let him fly around for like an hour, and then he got tired, and just stuck a stick up there and he landed on it and carried him outside.
No way.
It's kind of cool. Yeah,
it is cool. Pretty much a whisper.
Yeah, the bird whisperer.
Yeah,
just whisper a little tweet in their ear, and they do what I say.
Yeah,
yeah.
So speaking of fishing, we went the other day.
Yeah, we did, and you smoked me.
Well, I mean, not smoked, but
2-0.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Yeah,
and both your fish were pretty quality fish too.
Yeah, the first one was like probably the best one I've caught there.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I hadn't fished there a ton or anything, but I mean, I probably fished for bass in that park 20 or more times.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's the best fish you've caught 20 more times?
That's probably the best fish I've caught. Cool. But I've done a lot of fishing with like little bitty baits so that I could like catch either like hog, bluegill or bass.
Oh, yeah.
Fishing in the shallow stuff, because I just had my 4-weight out there, and a big bluegill on a 4-weight is pretty awesome.
Yeah. You were chunking like a wash rag the other day.
It's
a big one. What was that thing?
What do I call it? The Big Ugly?
The Big Ugly, yeah.
I just had like some extra. I think I got down. I was tying some streamers one day, and I got down. And I had just like a few extra little things, and I was like, "All right, rabbit strip, big, huge weights, weight eyes, and I had some chartreuse, just like a hackle or something like that. I guess it wasn't a hackle, but it was a
marabou.
Yeah. And I just fluffed that up as like a head, and tied it down, tied a nose on it, and said maybe this will catch something one day. And that was the first thing I threw on there.
There's money out there.
Yeah, it worked quickly, man. I caught that good one pretty early. We got a little bit of video on it. Mm-hmm. We actually might I might throw that together and link to it in the episode.
Cool. I'm ready to see that too. I bet it'll be pretty. It's a nice time of the evening for us.
Yeah,
to be fishing,
it was, man. It was a golden hour for sure. Yeah, the sun was like sun flaring.
It was a nice day. That was like the perfect day outside.
Yeah, it was.
You get a few of those every spring, and we're kind of getting them a little early right now, and I'm sure we're going to get some kind of death cold front come through, but like I bet there's like 6 days every spring that are just as good as it gets, and that was probably one of them. We got a few more coming.
Yeah, it's like that perfect temperature where it's not too hot and it's not very humid, which is kind of rare around here sometimes. And then and like the wind is nice and not too stout. And it was a good day, man. And the carp were finning like crazy, and we couldn't get to them.
Man, they're always right out of reach. It's like one of those things where there's these little puzzles in life in the outdoors, and you just cannot solve them sometimes, and they drive you crazy. And like, the last time we went out there trying to catch those carp, like we didn't hardly see any, and where we did, we just didn't have time to get to because we spent too much time in other places. And then the other evening we went where we thought they should be, and they weren't there, and instead they were in a different spot because the lake had come up like inexplicably 1.5 feet without rain. Weird. So where did that water come from? But there's just like these little things. And the thing that's been bothering me right now as of late, as far as the hunting side goes, is, man, we spent a lot of time this postseason looking for buck beds, and we know that they have to exist, but they're so hard, at least from what I think, it's so hard here to figure out where they're at, and it's driving me crazy because that, like, they're there. Like, deer are not that much different from Minnesota to South Texas, for, east to west either. You know what I mean? Like, yes, they're a little bit smaller, bigger, or whatever, and they might rut in different times, but guess what? They have to have food, they have to have water, they have to have a place to sleep, So there's going to be one. You just got to figure out where they're at. And
yeah. And we've kind of, so a lot of the research that we do or the things that we listen to, the media that we're fed is from the Midwest. because that's the Mecca, that's where all the serious whitetailers go, is to Iowa or whatever, and so it is different up there, and we have to kind of take some of that stuff with a grain of salt because things are different here. It's tougher. There's more pressure per acre, and less food per acre. Less agricultural food per acre, and so there just also happens to be less. Like, so there are things that we have talked about recently that we've seen where we've seen buck beds to the dirt. And it looks like that buck has bedded there every day for months.
Oh, like in the media we're watching and stuff?
Yes. And so, we have, how many miles have we done this spring and even winter and haven't seen that at all? And
I bet, we've probably covered over 40 miles.
We did 6 in one day, and we've been out several times, dude. Between the two of us, we went out like 5 times in 2 weeks,
And part of it, too, I think, is that, we have the whole issue with the deer versus hogs in habitat, where maybe we either can't see those places because the hogs have already put a, Volkswagen-sized hole where it should be, right. Or, the hogs just go to the places where the deer would make a spot like that. But I don't think it's happening everywhere. I think it's just not the same.
Yeah, I do too. And I think you have a point there with the hogs. Okay, so a buck is going to bed, in his safe spot if no guy walks through that area and busts him out of there or down, upwind of it or whatever, But what about if a big old group of 25 hogs comes right through there while he's bedded down?
I totally agree. I think pressure's pressure. And I think too. That's like, we talk about hunting pressure a lot, because we hunt a lot of public. But I think that deer feel pressure from all kinds of ways. It's just like, you've probably been on places before that there's, maybe heavy cattle or there's sheep or something like that. I tell you what, like if you're ever going to look at a place you're thinking about leasing, like in the southern part of the state, if there's sheep or goats on it, it's not worth it.
Yeah, my dad hunted on a lease with goats, and they were just he has stories about it still. This has been 25, 30 years. You know?
They're direct competitors, habitat and as far as browse goes.
And they're noisier.
Yeah, they're noisy.
Deer don't
hate
like
them.
that.
No, deer like it quiet, know. But so I just think it's a lot different. And I think you have a very valid point there, man, with the whole, humans and hogs and whatever else comes through. You're going to have deer bumping and going to different places. Yeah. And we might be in a situation now where there's so many hogs in our area that these bucks, as opposed to having like, this is my north wind, this is my south wind, that vice versa, 4 good beds, they've got 26 beds that are all right, that they know they can go hit one of them. You know?
Yeah, I think they know their areas, and I think they also, as you said, pressure is pressure. In that context, it is, but then also they do know a hog is not a person too. So like, if they get bumped out, they're gonna bump out when hogs come through there. But it's not one of those things like I'll never go back there kind of deal, But it is, like if a group of hogs happens to come through at 3 p.m., on a cloudy day, and that buck is bedded there, well, he's up for the day. He's going to go ahead and go, somewhere else, and he can't just go back and bed there later that day, because at some point between 3 and dark, he's got to he probably needs a place to bed or to mill around or something, but then he's going to feed after that. So he's probably not going to come back to that spot that day. And then, there's no telling like where he ends up if he does leave there and goes to bed somewhere else, an hour later or whatever. Well, does that change what he does for the next few days, because now he bedded here. And so he's going to enter that field over here or whatever and feed there all night. And then because of that, going to end up somewhere else chasing another doe, or something like that from a different family group that, kind of lives on the other side of that ag field that he ends up being closer to. There's just so many different variables there. And I think that we have that going on. On top of the fact that, I don't know, maybe our deer don't weigh enough to beat it down to the dirt. You know,
it might
sometimes.
be true, man.
I mean,
yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've got a longer growing season too. You know what I mean? You talk about the Midwest. There's 6 months where the grass doesn't grow there. You know what? Here we might have 10 days where the grass doesn't grow.
Yeah, I mean, we've got clovers and lamb's ear and all kinds of stuff popping up right now.
Yeah, there's pink flowers all over my yard. The dandelions and the daffodils and marigolds, all those things are just going crazy right now.
Yeah,
you know, and it's
February 12th.
Yeah, first day of February.
Yeah.
Which, of course, they'll probably just turn into icicles in a couple weeks, like always happens, and then it'll be real spring after that. But, you know, we're dealing with that down here. So there's just and of course, that would lead me to believe, okay, what do you want to lay on, the concrete or on something soft? You know, so why would deer not move around more? You know what I mean? And I'm sure they enjoy laying on the grass a little more. You know, I mean, deer don't do this to my knowledge, but we've seen many hog beds where, you know, hogs will gather reeds and actually build a bed.
Yes,
you
we
know?
have, yep.
And that's just the natural thing for all animals to want to be somewhere comfortable, you know.
You know, a dog will sleep on a pillow before it'll sleep on the concrete right next to it, you know. I mean,
unless you spend a lot of money on the dog bed or pillow, and then they probably won't sleep on it. You know, that's how it usually goes.
Yeah.
But.
Well, okay, so if you're listening, let's make a big circle and come back to kind of what we're talking about right now. So stay with us; this will all connect.
Yeah.
But we've been out several times, like I kind of alluded to earlier, in the last couple weeks, and we're gonna kind of bring it around full circle here in just a minute back to the buck bedding. But the first trip that we made to check a camera that was hung. I hung a camera a couple weeks ago, I guess, or maybe 3 weeks ago, and we came back to it, and it had been up 10 days and only took pictures 5 days because it filled the card up very quickly.
Sensitive little guy.
Yeah, it's a sensitive camera, but we did get a ton of pictures and got a good deer on film.
Yes.
One of those just good solid 3-year-olds with pretty decent brow tines and kind of some funky stuff going on that's going to, you know, if he puts on 10 inches as a 4-year-old only, he'll be a shooter, you know.
That's the kind of deer that, like, he's got the frame right now to be big, and, dude, he could add a lot of mass.
Yeah, and with the junk, you're talking about, I mean, from an inches standpoint, he could definitely blow up.
He's got, like, a huge, like, I mean, one side's like a big old, like, turkey foot looking thing.
Yeah, it's almost like it could be like a double main beam, but not, you know, or it could just be like a common base between the 2 and the 3, or, you know, it's super weird.
Cool. Like, I mean, what if that turns into a big moose horn palmation next year or something? Like, oh man, this is the kind of thing that gets you. Like, come on, October.
Yeah, I mean, but he's right there, right in there at being a shooter. He doesn't need much to grow to be a shooter next year. You know,
he's gonna be a mature deer next year too. I mean, me and you both kind of assess this deer as a 3.5-year-old, which is a borderline mature deer for us in this area. Anyways, you know, like the age classes. 3.5 usually is, you know, when most deer are getting smoked around here, if not 1.5, you know, as a spike. But that's neither here nor there. But so it's a very good, very cool thing to see, and it's from 3 days of pictures, dude. You got one mature buck, one shooter, one namer.
We had him 3 different times.
Yeah,
right,
or 4. I
3
think.
different days out of 5, or 3 or 4 different days out of 5. I can't remember exactly. I could probably go back and look right now.
But like, okay, so. What made you go hang that camera there?
Okay, so I found a food source that was pretty obvious, I felt like, and I can't remember exactly why I went where I went, but it was kind of easy. I kind of was like led into it, and I was with Jet, and so we didn't have much time, and we weren't going to go too far from the truck, and you know, we weren't a mile back in there or anything. And so I start kind of getting down to where it's getting a little harder to move around and stuff. And there was a bunch of reeds, like tall, I don't know what kind of reeds, but they were like 12-footers, you know. And they were just stacked in there, heavy stem count, lots of little bitty cedar elms, and then some like elevation change with a creek right there. And so I start moving through that stuff, and I kind of just like, I almost came straight to it, but I realized like that the deer were using pretty heavy using this trail that goes into this food source. and there was a fence that like the trail kind of goes to, and on the top strand there was a bunch of mud, and I'm like, okay, I know that's not hogs, you know, this is a 4 or 5 foot fence here that these are jumping over. So anyway, I backed it off, back down the trail just a little bit, and hung it on a tree, a good tree that I found, and I ended up having to use my little Leatherman, like keychain Leatherman or whatever, to actually like complete the bungee cord.
Man, I didn't look at that. You told me about it before we went in there.
Yeah.
I meant to look at your engineering.
I had to. So the tree was just like 2 inches too big to like get the little bungee cord around. So I had to leave my Leatherman in the woods for a couple days, week and a half.
How'd it go? Still functioning nicely?
Yeah, I think so. I hadn't used it, but it's not rusted or anything.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, and when we went back and checked it, there was a lot of deer on it for public land check, and several groups of does. And we kind of felt like looking at these pictures and studying these little progressions of pictures around where we would actually see good deer. There was like some eyes in the background of some of the shots and stuff like that. And we were starting to realize that even though that deer, that camera was sitting there getting good pictures, that there was probably even more deer using that area than we were getting on film, just because we weren't really quite on the food source or anything like that. We're just kind of back on one of the trails that leads in there, So anyway, it was a good pull. And that was the reason I hung it.
Yeah.
And then so we later on, it wasn't long after that, we went to check the TL camera, which is one that you hung.
Yeah, TL was in a place that was eerily similar to where you hung yours, and it's kind of one of those things where there's some a really good food source there, and some trails and stuff leading out of what I assumed to be bedding, but I didn't go in there. It was one of those situations where when I hung that camera, like I picked this spot out on a map. I said, okay, if I get after it, I can get in there. It might take me, an hour to get there, an hour out, or maybe even less if I really get after it, And I have like an hour and a half till dark, so I need to get on my horse, So I hit, my plotted trail that I was going to go down, and got to a creek crossing that I thought looked pretty good, but I wanted to go ahead and get closer to the food source and see, what that looked like. And the closer I got, the better it looked. I mean, it was like, man, there were trails going everywhere, and a couple places where the fence was lower, and you'd see where you can actually see, and most people have probably seen this. Like if you see a place where deer are jumping the fence a lot, there'll be a worn out spot, 2 or 3 feet from the fence, because that's, where their impact is coming down, wearing out grass or whatever. I saw a couple places like that, and then a little further up, still there's a place where the fence was completely gone, and man, it was like the deer interstate going through there. And I'm like, okay, this is the spot. All right, and I did kind of the same procedure you did, where I took the camera back into the woods just a little bit,
down a good trail.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, man. Is that okay? So those are all native warm season grasses right there around that. Okay, I hung this thing in a bunch of like evergreen cedars, and there was a few cedar elms in there as well, and some like knee high warm season native grasses. Okay, but those are all like bristly stemmed plants, And I think that looked like a good trail still. I mean, it was a good trail where it was at. But you know how it was so much like interwebbed trails right there? Mm-hmm. I think as soon as one thing walks through there, it makes a trail. You know what I mean? Like those trails might be a little deceptive. Because what ended up happening is I hung that, had a lot of confidence, and then we came back to check the camera. And, I mean, what? Did we have like 30? I mean, it was like, it's 300 pictures and...
Lots of grass moving.
And not a deer. There wasn't a deer on that whole camera, was there? Well, there's a group of hogs one night.
Yep.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, and this was a new camera for me, too. So it might be, I don't think it's user error because it's, kind of dummy proof. Mm-hmm. I think maybe it's just a not very sensitive camera.
Well, it wasn't there long either.
It's true. It was only there like 5 days.
Yeah.
Right? Or less, even.
Was it 3 days? It was like,
is that it?
I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it was.
No, but because I hung out on a Sunday and we went on a Friday to pick it up.
Okay,
so it's
so
5
days,
but still not long. But golly, dude, in 5 days on a decent food source,
Yeah.
you ought to get something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it might just be very well the fact that I just didn't place it in the right spot. And, you know, I mean, who knows? If it's a 1 second trigger time and the trail was too close to the camera, then I might have just missed every deer, and every one of those blanks should have been a deer, you know. And it's probably more like a 2 second trigger time after me and you messed around with it.
Yeah, sure. It was pretty slow.
Yeah. So,
Well, here's the thing that's frustrating with that is that we moved the camera closer to the food source because we wanted to try to make sure we could at least get inventory, and especially, you know, it's kind of scary to put it in certain areas sometimes when, like, we try to keep our cameras in pretty thick stuff sometimes just so that we feel like maybe it won't get stolen.
yeah,
you know?
it's public land. I mean, I mean, and we all would love to think that every hunter in the woods is a good guy, but that's just not how it is,
Right.
you know. And I mean, if you get a camera stolen on public land, you almost, I mean, you can be mad at the people, but at the same time, you're putting a camera in a
Right.
public place.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean,
it's like
you
laying
know the risk.
It's like laying your wallet on the hood of the car at McDonald's. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'm trusting you to not steal a wallet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
But the thing that's frustrating is about that is, okay, we got the camera up there. Well, when we get the inventory, our plan is to backtrack. So this is kind of something that we wanted to talk about is backtracking, because we want to eventually get to, okay, well, that deer I think is bedding right here, okay, because he's showing up at this time here, and he was showing up at this time, you know, later by the food source or
Yes.
whatever. So, you know, trying to kind of figure out where these deer are bedding. Well, the thing that's frustrating is you are on a pretty good trail, not too far from the food source, and we got no pictures. So
and I mean,
how are we going to backtrack
there's
that,
no
you know?
question in my mind that deer walked in front of that camera that didn't get their picture taken.
I mean, I would think.
You know what I
dude.
mean?
The trails
Like,
were
just
good.
where it was at. And it's frustrating. We just lost a week is what we did, you
Yeah.
know? And like, okay, so in postseason scouting, which is what we're doing right now in the South, we have a limited amount of time to do what you were saying, and that is check inventory. We're not patterning deer right now per se. I mean, I guess you could call it patterning when you're trying to backtrack to a bed, but we are trying to get an inventory on deer, inventory on bucks, and see who is an up and coming for next year, and see who we need to concentrate on.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure come August and September, we're going to have to start over figuring out where he's at, you know, but at least we'll know, hey, there's a deer worth hunting here, you know, and we're just trying to pretty much just gather info right now. And we lost a whole week of being able to do that in that spot because we had to move the camera more towards the food source, which is bad.
Right.
And, well, I mean, it's still, verdict's still out on how well that camera's going to work out.
Yeah, it's still sitting there, it's soaking. But you know, that's the hardest thing right there, because especially on these couple of units that we were talking about right now that we've hung these cameras on, they are very thick, and it's very hard to. I mean, there's diverse habitat, but it's like, well, they could bed here, and they could bed there, and they could bed in that habitat as well. And so we're trying to figure out where these deer are bedding. So I ended up, since I had the inventory on the camera that I hung, we moved it back into an area that was a few hundred yards maybe from there, and it's a little opening in amongst cedar elms, and there were several rubs in that little opening. So it's almost, it almost looked like what you would consider a staging area before going to the food source, just a few hundred yards away.
Yeah, and essentially that was at the first Y that we encountered off of the trail that you hung the camera on initially, which is pretty much what you're doing. Right? You're either going to say, okay, when we go back and check the camera, continue down this trail because, yes, we got more pictures of him here, or no, we need to backtrack and go the other direction, you know? So
what's really cool about these properties that we're talking about is that I feel like we could, they're like, these are not huge properties, and I feel like we could spend a long time and several different camera positions within the area and still not, understand exactly what's going on and see all the deer that are there and the bucks and everything. And that is exciting to me because like, man, it's cool. It's actually depressing to walk through a big stand of, public area and go, man, there is like nothing here. There's several hundred acres of nothing. But it's really encouraging to walk through an area of public that you're like, dude, I'm just almost overwhelmed because there's so much and so many places they could go.
Oh yeah,
and that's cool because like if you start to figure it out there, like I mean, that's encouraging to know that even if there are a few guys in there hunting with you that year, that there's plenty of habitat and plenty of deer, you know?
And the fact that it's so thick, it's like, okay, just because Joe Schmo walks in and throws his Red Bull can down at the bottom of the stand, 200 yards away, there's 17 of them, he's not just spooking the deer out of the country. It's so thick that deer can get a visual barrier and feel safe, 200 yards away. And, you're smart. You had the win right. You came in an hour early, and you can shoot that deer that you're targeting, wanting to harvest when – the other guy might have bumped him.
And I don't want to get on too much of a tangent here, but you mentioned something this week about how you were hearing some biologist or somebody talking about how deer don't change where they live or whatever.
Yeah, I can't remember who that was, but we take in a lot of stuff, listen to a lot of people, read a lot of books. But anyways, so what they were saying was that deer don't change their home range that often. They like a mature buck, he may feel the hunting pressure, but that doesn't mean he's going to hightail it to the next county. That just means he's going to change the way he moves and maybe the time of day he moves and stuff like that. But he's still going to be there, which is kind of encouraging. I'm not going to say that what that guy said is biblical or anything. You know what I mean? But like it's encouraging to think that that's a possibility and something worth testing out, because, when you deal with public stuff, like it would be a sad, sad day to go in somewhere and pattern a big deer and then, say, somebody decides to wake up early on November 15th for the first time and just traipse right on your stand at 8 o'clock, and you're like, well, my day's ruined. Well, maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's definitely encouraging to hear.
Okay.
So.
But back to the backtracking thing.
Yeah.
So, we were able to make, or at least attempt to backtrack your deer.
So we tried, and we got a camera hung, and I feel good about it.
Oh, me too, man.
I don't know if it's like super high traffic there or not, but it's like you can kind of see a chute through these big thick stands of cedar elm where there's native grasses, and it looks like if you were gonna go, okay, which way am I gonna walk from this camera? You would go right through there. You know?
Exactly,
and so that's good. I mean, and that's hopefully encouraging that we'll have some pictures on there. I don't think it's going to be maybe nearly as many as we had there, but if there is, that's great.
That's fine because we've accomplished a goal and now we set a new one.
Right.
Like we have a checklist pretty much. Like the first one's take inventory and hopefully find a buck that's worth targeting and then try to figure out more about him. So that's what we're doing now. We're trying to figure out, hey, does he use this area? What time does he use it? Because when he's on your camera from the first pool, it's middle of the night, straight up, like it's as dark as it can get. Yep. Like the sun is in China. And
there's no hunting season going on or anything.
No,
there's no pressure. Or anything.
So okay, so that tells us that he's pretty far from his bed.
Yeah,
either that or he's just real lazy and doesn't want to get up until way late. Which who knows? But you can't really. One of those we can actually figure something out about, and the other one we can't. So I think it's probably worth doing what we're doing and see if we can figure out like, hey, it's 8 p.m. here, so if we go 400 yards further in the woods, we should be getting pretty close to where he's getting up from.
I mean, I think that, like you said, I think that he's betting pretty far off. Like he was showing up late.
Yeah.
So you would have to think. You would have to think a deer is not just going to sit there bedded all day and then bed through several hours at nighttime too. He's probably going to get up right there in the evening hours and do something.
Oh yeah.
So probably pretty far off. And we did end up searching a little bit of that area further off, and we went down kind of to the south of there to the west and a couple of different directions, made big loops all over the place, and ended up finding lots of good sign and everything, but you just can't really tell for sure. And then
we didn't find much that like we thought was like, especially buck beds there. Like at all.
We didn't find much
we were really
looks,
trying to concentrate on that. We found a few what we thought were doe beds, kind of out in that native grass prairie stuff. But it's so hard when there's hogs using the same area and stuff to tell, who laid down there or whatever. But, I mean, there was lots of deer sign.
Yeah. And then so, and so then when we went to check your camera or the camera that you hung, and we moved it closer to the food source, then we had a good chunk of time left to scout that area a little better together.
We tore it up that day.
We tore it up.
We got like grid searching and looking at stuff, and I think we're just feeling good for some reason. I think it was a little cooler that day, and we're like, let's get out there.
Yep.
So I guess what did we do? We looked at our aerial view map and just looked at some thick stuff and said, okay, let's go to that. And then there was a water source we wanted to go check out. And so we went to check that out and kind of just followed trails from there, really, right?
Yeah, we were just we almost just said, like, we didn't say it, but it was like kind of like we just almost agreed on it, like with ESP or whatever. And we were like, we're just going to head this direction and try to find the best trails and stay on them and then work from there, And man, there was so much diverse habitat. Like I remember there was one area we went through, and you probably will know what I'm talking about, but like it opened up and there was kind of like some scrub trees and cedar elm in the mix or whatever there, and some native grasses and stuff. And then was not far on the other side, it was like big oak trees and water source. And then right after that, we got into like the thick cedar elm stuff, I guess, that was like, but it was weird. It wasn't brushy. It was like open underneath, and we start moving through that, and it kind of got vast from there. And it was unlike anything I've seen on any of the public land in Texas at all. I mean, it was just like, it was similar to some of the habitat I've seen, but it was different too. Like it was dark, like the hog habitat that we had talked about, where I told you I think a lot of those hogs like that shadowy type habitat and stuff with an overhead canopy. And it was kind of like that, but the trees weren't super big, and they weren't brushy either. It was open underneath. Man,
yeah, it was a really weird dimension where like you could see very, very good for 80, 90 yards, and then like at probably 110 yards, it was like there's a wall because the stem count like at that distance just got so much for what you could see. Like you just couldn't see anything past that, but it was really open in all directions underneath there.
Yeah.
So it's like it's one of those things where like, okay, what do the deer even use this for? Because there's good trails going through there, and intersecting trails too.
We were asking that question out loud.
Yes.
Right before
I freak out and completely ignore what we're doing in the first place because there's two sheds laying on the ground right in the big middle of this big vast expanse.
Yeah. And you're like probably 60 yards from me or so.
Yeah.
And the sheds are like 40 or 45 or 50, somewhere in there, And so like I could see them, but to me they looked like a rib cage. And so the first time you were like, uh-oh, I was like, oh, there's a dead deer right there. I can see it, And you kept getting closer and like freaking out more and more. I was like, okay, there's either it's a deadhead or, something else. I don't know.
Yeah, so Casey gets really excited over things. Tyler's figuring that out. But, so we found a matching set.
Good set.
Good
dude.
set, too. I mean, like, a mature deer. I mean, he's not like a high-scoring deer, but he's a respectable buck,
Decent mass.
Yeah, I mean, very cool shed to find, and we found both of them.
Yep.
They're from the same deer. He lost them at the same time, which, okay, let's put quotes around same time. If he's bedded there, one might fall off, and then 3 hours later, the other one falls off right there, So
we don't
you don't really know.
They're
not new. They're pretty old. They got a few places chewed on them,
They've been there a few years.
Yeah, so... and there's no sign of any bed there where it was at. So it's like, what was this deer doing down in here? And me and you got to talking, and some of the things we've read kind of triggered in our memory that cedar elm is kind of preferred browse, especially this time of year whenever they're starting to bud out.
Yeah,
those deer will stick their heads up, and you had this on camera even. Those does were eating the buds off that cedar elm tree. So it kind of made me think that possibly things that I've been referring to in my mind, designated as a bedding area or possible bedding, I may have been completely wrong in trying to tell the deer something that it's not true. You know what I mean? Like, and I've told you that for years. These places that they're heavy secondary growth, like, oh, that's bedding. You know, like in my mind when I hunt down there. But it might be one huge food source,
right?
And that's why he was down in there. And that would make sense because when's he losing his antlers? The same time of year that the cedar elms are budding.
Right.
So,
yeah, that does make sense. Yeah.
And they got to stick their head up in the cedar elm to try to get to the buds. So they might be knocking antlers off.
Yep.
I mean,
yep. It's a good point.
Yeah. So I think that maybe in the future, like around here, especially in March, maybe we should look in those cedar elms. Like if we're really trying to just shed hunt that day, maybe cedar elms might be kind of one of the tickets, you know, once you start getting those budding trees and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely enough. There's enough brushy scrub there to knock them off. You know, so if that indeed is a viable theory, then that's good, and which I think it is. You know, I mean, like, that's a good point. And those I mean, you could tell that doe was eating the buds off of those trees.
Yeah,
you know? And you could see the buds in the picture.
I feel like that happened in more than one occasion through that series.
It did. Yep.
Pictures.
So anyway, we worked our way through there and
found a really good trail next to a terrain feature that was impassable, or not impassable, but almost impassable, that pretty much butted up to a water feature. So it was like, man, that's a great funnel we found there. And it looked like they were actually watering there.
Yeah, we could see where like one of the trails that we came in on actually dead ended at this little like oxbow thing or whatever. And we were like, maybe that's a good, you know, early season stand location right there. So
yeah, for sure.
That was cool. And then so we ended up continuing following the trail. And
we were actually headed out more than anything at this point in time. Like, my wife wasn't feeling well, so I got the call. It was time to go. So we're like, okay, sorry, Tyler, I got to go, man. We got to turn around.
So we started getting it.
Yeah, we were headed out, and like all of a sudden we went through like this big, like kind of willow, marshy, flat stuff that's dry, but it's normally wet kind of thing. And there wasn't a lot of deer sign there. It
was vast. And there wasn't hardly any deer sign.
No, I mean, there was like beaver chews. I'm like, oh, is that a rub? No, it's beaver.
Yeah.
And then like as soon as the terrain went from flat to sloping up that hill, like we had some really drastic changes in like vegetation. You know, like we went from like that willowy stuff to some locust bushes, and then on into what was cedar mixed with cedar elm and some actually really tall viney stuff.
Yeah, you were kind of got up into it before I did, and you were like, "Man, this stuff looks good," and I was like, not really seeing it yet. And then so like probably a couple minutes later I started getting into it and I was like, man, this stuff looks good.
Yeah. And then what was that? What was right there?
Okay, so we get into this stuff and we're not far into it, and we're looking and like there are tons of just thorns everywhere, man. And a lot of it had built up into these nests, you know. And we start looking around. I'm like, man, this looks like a bed right here. This looks like a bed over here, you know. And the thing is, when you see several beds together close, you think hogs usually when you're around, you know, when you're in Texas or in the South probably. And so we continue on, and I look up, man, and the first thing I see is just ears, you know. And 50 yards away, there's a deer that looks like he had I thought he was still bedded because it was, you know, the stuff was so tall around him. I couldn't tell. He was kind of a little bit uphill, and I couldn't tell if he was still better or not. And I was like, there's a deer. And
he was actually closer to me than he was to you.
Yeah.
And I was real close to him.
You couldn't see him at the time. And I pointed at him and I was like 50 yards. So you kind of triangulated and started heading towards him. I got the camera out, you know. And so it was just a little spike, and he takes off, and we find his bed where he was at. We're like, so these might be all deer beds, you know. And if you find one deer, you kind of think, you know, well, this is, you know, definitely a place that they bed, but, you know, maybe hogs are mixed in, or, you know, is this kind of one of those coincidences where he got busted out of his bed by hogs or something, and now he's bedding in a kind of a satellite bedding.
When it's like a little old Joe like that.
You know, exactly. Like, yes.
He's like not a mature buck, not a doe who's smart. Like, he's a year and a half old. Like, it's just the dumbest deer in the woods. Right. So you can't really trust what you learn from him. But
he does weird things.
At the same time, you can take verbatim what's in front of you and say, okay, he did like to lay down in this place for what reason, and he had cover at his back. So I mean, there's something there.
And so Yeah, so then we carried on and we did a video, and we were kind of just chronicling what we had seen and what we had done throughout the day. Found the sheds, found that buck, and then so we moved on. And 75 yards or less later,
yeah, then like the woods start falling down around me pretty much. Like I literally so I jumped 2 bucks that were 10 yards from where I was standing.
Close.
Like they let me get close.
I could hear them bust out, and I was like 30 yards from you.
Yeah, and I got a good look at both of them. One was a young buck, but had a really long main beam on one side. You know, kind of may have been a good 1.5 year for around here. You know, like he had a decent little set of horns. And the other one, I mean, he was up and comer. Like he wasn't very wide, but he was tall, had long brow tines, and probably like an 8 or something like that.
Yeah,
but
going
you know,
straight away, kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, straight away. Of course, he looked big. You know, they all look big when they're going running away. But I mean, he wasn't a shooter, but he's a deer worth noting. You know,
right.
And like, so at that point in time, you say, all right, that deer's worth noting. Why is he bedded right there?
Yeah, because he's been around. He knows the game and the show.
I would assume he's a 3.5. He might have been 2.5. You know, I didn't get a good look at his body, but just judging by the kind of antlers he had. So he's been around long enough to realize, like, hey, this is a good place to bed.
Right.
And, like, at that point in time, like, I literally saw those deer stand up and run off. You know, I know exactly where the beds were, and you were not far behind. And me and you both walked up there, and we walk around this cedar tree, and there's a fallen down locust tree, and there's like this perfect just predator safety barrier right behind them, right? Okay, and then they're like looking kind of up the hill, more in that open prairie stuff. And we still cannot visually identify where those deer were laying down.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, there was several little areas right there that like that looks like a bed.
Yeah.
There's like 3 right there that you could pretty much tell they were beds at some point probably, but we couldn't figure out which one was which.
I tried the old Indian trick where you like put your hand down on the ground and feel if it's warm. That doesn't work.
Yeah. It gets cold pretty quick.
Yeah, I guess it gets cold pretty quick. Yeah. But, I mean, either way, like we still figured out that was the area. And now that, I mean, it was really cool to see that, okay? And it's funny how like I've busted deer my whole life, like hog hunting and stuff, and never thought twice about, oh, yeah, well, there's a deer there. He beds there. You know, like, and then now, like this year, I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. Like, there's a reason they're there, and we can target them because they're there.
And we basically have considered that a buck bedding area or a bedding area for deer, but we only saw bucks.
Yeah.
3 bucks.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, that little guy, you know, who knows what he means, but the other 2 were worth noting for sure, you know, and that's 3 bucks right there in that spot, you know. And, okay, so here's the deal. We saw that those beds where I jumped the 2 from, and they still didn't look like the greatest of bedding spots. So what if, yet again, still another 50 yards up the hill in a direction we didn't walk, that's where, you know, the 4.5-year-old mature buck is bedded, and we didn't make it there. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's the satellite bed or the subordinate beds to whatever's there, but that's something to figure out more in the future.
Yeah.
But at least like we're on the track of it. You know what I mean?
So, and that's what's rough about, you know, especially when we hunt that place, you know, there's some travel involved, and that's what kind of stinks about that is that like you make a line through an area and you try to see it with your eyes best you can because you got to kind of move on. But like, man, if we just had more time up in that area, like we could have turned back around and made a pass 50 yards, you know, further east or whatever direction we wanted.
It was getting dark anyways at that point in time. Like we didn't have a whole lot more time to do much anyway.
Right, yeah,
like,
it was pretty close to dark.
Well, yeah, we got to the vehicle, you know, almost
sundown. Sun was down, you know.
Yeah. But still learned a ton right there. And we found 2 deer carcasses that were old there too.
Yes, so we thought maybe that the deer had been injured at some point and were going back to the bedding because that's the safety they knew, and then died there. You know?
So I mean, it's high deer use area for sure. It was cool to find.
Yeah. So and then after that, we had just enough daylight left that we thought, well, let's hit a back road and go do a little, you know, just a little glassing and see if we can find some stuff. And we wanted to stay, you know, we were going to stay close enough to public that we felt like if we did find something that maybe it was using public
and
by
pretty
chance.
much we had like 2 options I mean, both were the way home, and one would benefit us and one wouldn't. And, me and you both are about maximizing our time, away from, we love to do what we do, but we're about maximizing our time that we do spend away from our families and that we do spend away from work. So, why not on the way home go look for deer in a place that you could possibly hunt, So, yeah, we took that back road and weren't seeing a whole lot really. Like there was some ag around, but it was all tilled under and was pretty much bare dirt. And then we went through a creek bottom.
And we had seen a buck right before that.
We
little
did.
Half-horn 2-year-old or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And nothing. It's like, we got to hunt here, but cool.
And then we came around the corner, and it was like chaos.
Golly, man, it was like nuts. There was we counted 33 in the field,
and
right?
I guarantee you, I missed them.
Oh, I guarantee there was at least a third of them already made it to the woods.
I don't know. I guess they were focused to your eyes, and it was a little blurry for me. So like when I didn't want to mess with it, but like I was having a hard time distinguishing when there was 5 deer standing there, how many there actually were.
Yeah,
and so I was just counting the ones I knew I could tell. There's at least, like if there was 5 deer standing there, and I couldn't really tell if there was 5, I would say 4. I'd count 1, 2, 3, 4. So I counted to 33, and they were just everywhere, dude.
Oh my gosh, it was nuts. I mean, it was just like it looked like fireflies in a pasture. How many whitetails blew up, and it was cool to see that many deer at all. But that shows you, that showed us for one thing that that was a food source they were in. Yeah, and that's what they're hitting this time of year.
Yeah, the one thing that's really cool about it is, it's a little ways from public, but the way that we look at the map and figure is that these deer can definitely use public and probably do at sometimes, especially during the rut.
Yes, and 2 of those deer are worth noting that we saw in that pasture.
Good bucks.
One was one of those, me and you both have this thing for big 6 points, which is kind of weird. It's contradictory to the modern thought of the more Boone and Crockett score, the better. But man, just a big gnarly 6 points, pretty cool. And one of those was
heavy
one.
deer,
and the other one was just so far away. I mean, he was like 1,200 yards away or something. But he was a big deer too.
I saw him.
Yeah,
and he was good. I mean, he's one of them solid shooter bucks.
Yeah, we don't have any idea how many points he was or anything, but you just tell he had a huge frame.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so that was cool. That's cool.
Very, very cool. That was a good that evening. We accomplished some stuff, man. I felt so good about putting some theories to practice.
And we actually had a camera in that area. I mean, obviously on public, but we call it our Houston area, and we had a camera there, and we had a buck. Decent buck on there.
One of those, though. It was decent deer. We have the old average East Texas 8-point, which is pretty much like a 120 class 8-point. If you see a deer that gets shot with a rifle in East Texas and people are happy with it, it's usually that, And it's a good deer. I probably would think about shooting him too if he's a mature buck, when he came through, but it wasn't like something that drew us there. We weren't like, okay, we got to target this deer next year. But after driving through there and doing a little recon with the glass, now we're kind of reconsidering that area a little more,
Yeah, it wasn't the greatest card pull. I mean, it was. We ended up doing a bunch of running around and scouting that day, and didn't get to hang the camera where we wanted to because we couldn't find a good enough tree to put it on, and so we had to move to a different area. We were kind of like, we need to get out of here. We in a time crunch. We got to get back home, and it's a long way. So we ended up not hanging the camera where we wanted to, and kind of hanging it in a spot that when I went back, I was like, this wasn't as good as I originally thought, even before I looked at the camera. So anyway, but yeah, that was cool. And then we did one more stint this week, just quickly blasted out on a place much closer to home that we call Damascus.
The road to Damascus. Yeah. And that was a cool little trip. Sometimes we're traveling a long ways and we burn up a bunch of time on the road just to go, there's been many times. I mean, you've gone and the scouting trip isn't as long as what the drive is. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's nice to have a place that's a little bit closer to the house to be able to, run out there right quick. And we had been out there one time earlier in the season just to scout it out, just as kind of like a punt pretty much. It's like, well, this is a small track, but we'll see what's going on. And I actually found some decent sign, you know, and had a camera at our disposal. So we're like, oh, we'll put one out and see what happens. And went out, pulled that camera, didn't check it in the field, so we didn't really know what was on there. But on the way out, I mean, we really saw a bunch of deer sign for that place, you know.
Yes,
like
we did.
Man. I mean, it's just like killer almost.
You see this much sign and you have to think there's a lot of bucks in there.
Yes.
I mean, the only place I've ever seen that much sign in one area is Kansas.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of deer making that sign that and I know that for a fact. So
that's the thing about here. I mean, we do have a good deer population in East Texas, but they're hardly ever concentrated because there's so much decent habitat, you know. So, and it's like everywhere you looked there could have been habitat, but those couple trails that we followed out, like, I mean, that was just where they were living.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it was kind of almost one of those things that, like, you know, you hear like guys. You always like read I do. I've read like Field and Stream articles where they're talking about rabbit hunting. You know, they want to throw a small game deal in there to mix things up. They talk about rabbit hunting and, you know, walking around the thickets, and I'm like, I don't really know, you know. I mean, I've seen some thickets, but it's like just humongous area of thicket, you know. And there was like a thicket line there, you know what I'm saying? Like it was kind of open canopy on both sides or whatever, and then a thicket line, and we kind of worked our way down the sides of it at first, and it sucked us into the actual thicket because there were so many rubs just in there, man. Yeah, and that was cool. Yeah, that was cool.
And then yet again, looking around, man. I don't know.
Observant.
I might have my eyes in the wrong place, actually. But I found another shed. Another old, you know, they're all old this time of year. We haven't really seen a buck on camera or in person that's shed an antler, we thought, yet, you know. So, I mean, that was.
We have a lot of squirrels. I mean, I think, from what I understand, they chew on them for their teeth.
Yeah. Well, that shed that I found there at that place, the G2 and G3 are both gone, chewed off.
Yep.
Okay, so I was talking to my dad about this. It kind of like has this allure to it when they chew off that much, because you're like, was this a 3-inch G2 or I mean a G3 or like a 7-inch G3?
Yeah.
You know, like, was this G2 like a big old dagger with a split off of it, or was it just a little, like, you know, little small guy, you know, like, you don't know. But I mean, the shit I found had 22-inch main beam on it, which is pretty dang good for around here.
That's,
you know,
a solid buck, man. Yeah. And he was decent mass at the base and stuff too. And I mean, but you know, I've dealt with the same thing. I found a monster shed in Kansas one time. I've showed it to you. And
that palm shed, is that the one you're talking about? You've got one that's just pretty much just like the base.
No, but yeah, that one too.
Big. Yeah.
But I found one, and it's got it's giant, dude.
Yeah.
It's got a big old, just gnarly, heavy main beam, and it's a mainframe typical 6-point side, and then it's got a kicker coming off the G2, and all the tines are like drilled down to like 3 or 4 inches off the main beam by a porcupine or something, you know. And you're just like, oh, what was this? And we just had to like take a range. Like, here's what I think on the bottom, and here's what I think on the top. And he's right. I mean, he's Booner.
Yeah,
you know, he's a stud.
Yeah.
So it just, you don't know if he was a 184 or 172, you know, or whatever. But he's awesome.
That's
for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I found it actually looking for that 6-point.
Oh, when you were looking for that deer?
Yep.
Thanks, you found an awesome shed and got a buck in the same
shot
day.
A big old 126-inch straight up 6-point. It's 22 inches wide.
Yeah, that's a good day, man.
Yeah, it was a great day.
Yeah. Hey, I'll take that. If we can get that happen next year on public land, give it to me.
I mean, I'll take something even less than that for sure.
Yeah, probably.
So
yeah, but so I mean, I guess, you know, the goal for today is to kind of you know, address the whole, what do you do once you get this postseason scouting? Like, once you kind of get a hand on it, you know what I mean? Like, okay, so our whole goal is to get deer inventory, right? And you know, because we can't hunt them right now, so what's the point in taking the pictures? Well, you got to figure out where they're at, and
we want to find it. We also like want to make sure not just areas, but also tracks that are worth spending time for.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
so like we don't want to go and spend a day in a tree where we don't know if there's a good shooter buck in that area or not. And, things can happen between now and next fall for sure. Deer could run out on a road and get run over with, no horns on his head whatsoever in the summertime. But if the deer is in there right now and he's a decent buck, the genetics are probably there for there to be one worth.
Yeah, or the food in general for him to grow big horns too.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like, we're not buck snobs by any means. Like if it's a good mature deer and he doesn't score a lot, I'd love to shoot a deer like that. You know what I mean? But at this point in time, it's like, okay, so why not look for the biggest? I mean, we all love to shoot big deer. That's the whole point of what we're doing. You know, like why not try to do your best?
The
to
rarity of that animal is just too cool, man.
Yeah, and I mean, and I don't know if it really means a lot, but the fact it's like a treasure hunting thing. You know what I mean? Like we're like the pirates of the woods, but like, and you feel like, let me back up. Me and you both like competition. You know what I mean? And this is like, at this point in our lives, the greatest competition we can have is we're competing with ourselves and a wild animal. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you might as well set the stakes high. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, we definitely hit on all the things that we kind of intended to talk about, and we definitely wanted to show that there's still opportunity to get out and enjoy the great outdoors right now and still enjoy the game, and we're doing this on heavily hunted public lands.
It's like, it's a testament to how much more time we spent in the woods at postseason this year, because like, okay, me and you both have done a lot of deer hunting in our lives and done a lot of preseason scouting. I've never done the postseason scouting thing, like, ever.
It's way better, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's way better.
You get to see everything, and you don't have to walk around when it's 110 degrees.
No mosquitoes. Yeah. Tyler doesn't have to deal with snakes that often, except
for we almost ran over
I almost got a water moccasin the other day. So watch out for those 75-degree days.
Yeah, no kidding.
In early or late winter. But I'm finding more cool stuff, too, because when you preseason scout, a lot of those sheds that we found, or a few of them at least, and maybe that big bonehead too, like he'd have been covered up with grass and weeds and stuff.
Be hard to
see a lot more stuff. And then like we can see scrapes, old scrapes. I found 2 old scrapes, the other day when we were walking around on TL. Mm-hmm. So there's neat stuff to be out there.
Yeah, definitely. It's worth going, man. I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up, man. Just to end this thing, we will definitely link to the Texas Parks and Wildlife. What was it?
The forage stuff?
Just a little PDF or something, right?
Yeah, it's a little PDF file. It just talks about, I'm assuming you could probably print it out and put it on a little card. I think that's what it's for, to have a little field guide or whatever.
Yeah, field guide, yep.
And that's what I read on about the cedar elm and how.
And I had seen that a few months ago. Yeah. I think I said something about that as well. Mm-hmm. But there was other things that you were showing me that I hadn't quite dived into.
And there's a lot of weird stuff on there too. I think we're going to get into some of that. Like me and you talked a little bit about maybe doing some forage profiles, something like that.
Yeah.
So maybe y'all look forward to that in the future. We're going to do
like a forage series.
Maybe,
videos.
And this is just as much for us to learn as for y'all. And the greatest way for me to learn is to do research on it, to share with other people. You know what I mean? So, like, we're going to do our best to, like, go out in the field and maybe do a little just show on, how to find this or what it looks like in the wild.
Right, and what areas it tends to grow in, how the deer are using it, what time of year, man. I mean, it's going to be hopefully pretty informative. Yeah. So, but I'll link to the browse chart that you sent me in the notes. And then we're going to do like a sheds and beds video showing what we've been doing and where we've, what we found the other day. We talk about a few things that kind of led us to believe that this was a bed or, that we did find the deer bedded there, we talked about. And then show some of the sheds that we found in the video. I'll put that together and we'll link to that in the episode as well. Also, KC, you wanted to talk about HR 622, right?
Yeah. So yet again, the fight is never over, and I know it gets old, but we all hate poachers and hate the idea that someone unlawfully takes an animal that you partially own, and pretty much if the bad guys can't take your public lands directly. They will find a way to do it indirectly, okay? And what is happening right now is supposedly H.R. 621 is over, the one where they were trying to solve 3.3 million acres of public land across the West. Well, H.R. 622 is still on the table. H.R. 622 states that they would like to severely cut the law enforcement budgets of BLM land, National Forest Service land, and other public lands. Well, pretty much their intent is to turn those into the Wild West, where there's
get
no
rid
law.
Of all enforcement.
Yeah,
right?
get rid of all enforcement, and that way it can be like, oh, well, these places are so crazy, there's so much crime, we just need to get rid of them because we can't manage them.
Yep.
Well, you can never manage anything if you remove any, strong arm that is there to take care of such situations. You know what I mean? So,
and Whit talked about this. They're just starving the beast. They're going to continue to take money from that we have had allocated in the past to be a friend of the sportsman, if that makes sense. So anything they can do to kind of starve the big giant of public land and forestry and the services that go along with it, they're going to try to do such. So gotta be careful and gotta be involved with that best you can. And one good way to do that kind of passively, so that you don't have to focus too much of your life into it, is follow the links that we're going to post here. And you can do just a few small things by calling a representative or something if you want to be that active. If you don't, donate some time or some money to BHA or to Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and these are the people that are very much active in this thing. So just the funds will help out tremendously towards our cause, and it allows you to be super passive about it. And obviously we don't necessarily want you to be that way, but I totally understand you can't do everything,
Yeah.
So that we're going to link to the representatives if you want to call them. We'll also link to BHA and TRCP again, just to make sure that you have that opportunity to find it easy. And once again, I ask that if you have enjoyed this episode, we would appreciate a iTunes review tremendously. Thank you for the people that have done that so far. We've got, I think I saw a new one pretty recently, but we're getting a few, and it really has helped us to be optimized when people search us and to find that. And hopefully all of these things that you care about and we care about will be the good news that is spread when these iTunes reviews start to move us up in the search results. So thank you guys for doing that. And I'm going to go ahead and say the thank you in advance if you are going to do that. Also, check us out on social media, Instagram. You'll see some video content there and a lot of really cool pictures that we're taking with sunflowers and Casey's beautiful hair. And make sure you follow us. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And you'll get to see that foraged series and some cooking stuff that we're hopefully going to do really soon again, and anything else that's going on. So appreciate that. I love you guys. I hope you're having a great week, and we'll see you soon.